On today's very special episode of not just the Locked On Padres podcast, but also the Locked On Giants podcast, we are letting the hate flow on today's episode, talking about some of the players that we've noticed that both of our teams have had over the years since we've been hosting that really aren't liked at all by our own fan bases, and probably more so for my team. But even still, I wanted to do a crossover because people seem to have a whole ball of laughs when I did this with my buddy Miller Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks last week. But we are doing it Giants style. And because last week I talked about Diamondbacks players I didn't like. Now we're going to talk about Padres, which should be a lot of fun. And I imagine people already know who I'm going to say. But I've been talking too long already. Let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Ben Kaspick. As always, he's been on the pod 27,000 times, which is probably why I waited a second to introduce you. People already know. You know what I mean? They're like, that's our guy.
Yeah.
That's our guy who brings the numbers that we get mad at every now and then. And then we listen to him and we're like, oh, yeah, I guess that's a good point. It's Ben Kaspick, sir. How you doing?
I'm good. And today it's probably not going to be so much about numbers. And sometimes some of my listeners, they're clamoring for that a little bit. Sometimes they don't want the data. They want maybe just to let the hate flow. And I think we're going to let that happen. And this has been a very interesting offseason for the Giants in terms of maybe they've traded away some guys who people didn't like kind of on purpose because they didn't perform, but also they were not popular because they didn't perform. So I'm looking forward to just diving in because I think you may be surprised. There are a lot of players that Giants fans get upset about. So
Oh, yeah. I can't wait, man. And I think one thing we're going to do to differentiate from at least my listeners, what we did last week. Again, I'm going to be talking about Padres players. We're not doing each other's, but I do think that we should take a guess before each one of us makes a pick. I think that'll be a little bit of fun. So strap in, folks. The hate is here. We're both Anakin Skywalker out here. Let's do this. But first, let me tell you guys really quickly, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. As always, FanDuel is always there for you guys. Just for listening to the pod, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And to get started, I left a coin. Miller and I usually we flip a coin to determine who goes first. But since I came up with this idea, I may as well go first and talk about, in my opinion, the players that I've noticed over the years have just seemed to be the most hated. And some of them not as much for me. And we're going to start with a little bit of a light one because I know everyone is expecting a certain player to be named. He's blocked my Padres account on Twitter, which is incredible. But first, we're going to talk about one to do a little bit of a throwback. And I don't have any ill will towards him, but it is Craig Stammen. Stampeding Stammen is what I nicknamed him a few years ago because he ran out of that bullpen looking like he was, Braveheart about to take on the world. And folks, he was not Braveheart. Here's the thing with Craig Stammen. I think mostly it comes down to being a relief pitcher that just blew up in the worst possible times. He would give up runs for sure. He wasn't that great of a relief pitcher. But for me, in my experience, this was the number one guy every single time, Ben. He was called it. All of my Twitter feed. And even occasionally on the broadcast, they'd be like, hey, Stammen has been, not the most trustworthy reliever lately. And I think part of it was because he got paid a decent amount by the Padres. Not a lot, don't get me wrong, but he was brought in 2 years, 4.5 isn't a lot initially, but then the 2 years, $9 million. It just frustrated people a little bit that this guy came in and was basically just always giving up leads. It almost looked like his confidence evaporated immediately. And I felt bad. Definitely not an awful player. He had one good season back in 2018 with the Padres, and then he fell off a cliff. Basically soon after that, delivering a 5.63 ERA one year, a 3.06, which wasn't that bad. I don't think he was that bad, but it is because of the circumstance and the times he blew up. It's like, imagine if Camilo Duvall only was bad in 4-run leads, and it happened multiple times. You know what I mean? It wasn't just oh yeah, they brought him in the 8th, he gave up one run, didn't blow the save, but it was just always, it would be a disaster. And that's what I felt bad because Craig Stammen wasn't really that bad, but that's my first one.
That's funny. It's just so funny to me that the perspective of a fan base can be so much different than the perspective of another fan base about a certain player who's on that team. Because I think of Stammen and I think of kind of staple of the Padres bullpen and like someone who's good. And it's
Mhm.
just funny because, I bet you that some of mine might surprise you too.
Mhm.
But the first one, the one that just kind of jumps off the page
Can
to
I
me,
guess?
sure.
Can I guess? Let's do the guess. I forgot to let you
Yeah.
guess for mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't have guessed
Um,
Stammen. So,
no, yeah, I know, but I'll have some fun ones upcoming. But Jeff Samardzija.
oh, that's a good one. I mean, he makes the list for me.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting one because I think a lot of people like kind of actually liked him
Hmm.
because he had like one season where he was pretty good, but it
Hmm.
was like a 5-year contract and the rest of them were not.
Yeah.
And Giants fans, like basically at that time, it was like shortly after the championships. And but yeah, I mean, what what bothered me about Jeff Samardzija was first of all, like he just kind of had an attitude all the time,
Hmm.
and he would like literally turn red with anger and like give up homers and just turn red with rage. And it just like I was mad, he was mad, and it was just like everybody's mad. And so it just,
Yeah.
he didn't just shrug it off. Like you could tell he wore it on literally like his face would get flushed with, he
He was
can't
a
help
guy.
it, but at
He
the
was
same time,
absolutely a guy. You know what I mean? In every sense of the word. He was the
yeah,
muscle meathead vibes to him for sure. But
totally.
at one point in time, he was like the most coveted, not most coveted, but he was like in trade rumors all the time because he was on the Cubs, I believe it was, and they were still rebuilding. So everyone was excited. He went
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
White Sox and was a mess. And then, like you said, I think had like a quick okay season with the Giants and then fell off, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the beginning of the end when the Giants like signed him and Johnny Cueto, and at first they were good. This was 20 like six, going into 2016. Oh my gosh, you just sparked my memory, and one of the most maligned players for the Giants. It wasn't going to be my first one, but I'll go with it now because it reminds me Mark Melancon. And
Yes.
that I was wondering if that might surprise you because it almost surprises me because if you actually look at the numbers, he was never really that bad from like a run prevention standpoint, but he was
Mhm.
just never a reliable closer. And they signed him at a time when they were coming off a season that was like blown up because of their bullpen. They just utter like you
Yeah.
could not collapse more than they collapsed bullpen
Mhm.
wise in the last like 2 months or 3 months of the season. Yet they made the playoffs anyway, just barely. And then their bullpen blew a 3-run ninth inning lead in the playoffs against the Cubs. And I
Oof.
was there,
Oh no.
and it was like 5 relievers, and then nobody could get an out, and um, and then they lost, and then that was the game that clinched the series. And if they had won, it would have gone to a decisive Game 5 in Chicago with Cueto, who was having his good one and only great year with the Giants, lined up to pitch. And so anyway, that's all the context that they then go out and sign Mark Melancon to like
Mhm.
be the answer and like resolve their bullpen woes. Opening day the next season in Arizona, I think he gets the first 2 outs of the inning.
I
I
think I
think it's
remember this too.
I think he gets the first 2 outs of the inning,
Yeah.
and then he gives up like 4 consecutive hits and blows the save. And that was 2017. A year they went on to lose 98 games, coming off
Yeah.
a year in which they made the playoffs, won a wild card
Mhm.
game, won the wild card game. So that was like the beginning of the Giant. That was the beginning of the end of the run of success that they had. And Mark Melancon, just like from day one when he blew opening day, dude, Madison Bumgarner pitched amazing in that game. He hit 2 home runs in that game.
Yes, I do remember this. Yes.
Your pitcher goes like 7 dominant, and he
Sequence
had
of
like
crop lines.
12
Yeah.
strikeouts, and he hit 2 homers. And then in comes your savior closer, and he blows this game. And it was just like that. He, and it wasn't just that. He continued to just not be reliable. And
Absolutely.
then he went elsewhere and ended up
And he was
having
great.
success.
Two
And
things.
also, they traded him and got, by the way, Giants fans may not even know this because it was so long ago. In 2019, they traded him and got Tristan Beck, who had a nice year last year with the Giants and figures to be a big part of their pitching staff this year. So it turned out maybe that Melancon yielded something positive ultimately.
Hey, he salvaged it a little bit. That's all we could ask for
Yeah,
sometimes.
took a
Two
while,
things.
but
Yeah, it was a very delayed,
very
salvage,
delayed.
a delayed salvage. Two things. Number one, I swear there's nothing more frustrating than a bad bullpen. You're just like, you got to be kidding me. You guys can't throw one inning. You can't get one at like three individual guys, of course, not as a whole. Like, you can't bring me this reliever that can't just at least not give up 4 home runs or whatever. It is maddening. And number two, Miller Thomas, again, who I'm bringing up. That's my guy, obviously, because I've cited him like 5 times on here. But we were doing most hated. He was choosing most hated Padres. One of the first ones he brought up was Mark Melancon. Why? Because as soon as he went to the Diamondbacks, he was a disaster and blew all their games. So Mark Melancon is just a favorite of one team in the NL West and is a hated nemesis of 2. Let me tell you, with the Giants, who this was earlier on too. This at least with the D-backs, you can be like, nah, he's old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe we should have expected that. That was his last ounce was with the Padres. With the Giants, it's like, no, he was young. He was.
They gave him a big contract. It was like Aroldis Chapman. I forget the other guy. There was Kenley Jansen. Maybe like there was just good relievers. That was like the strength of that free agent class, and he was one of the big closers. And it was just I want to say it was a disaster, but if you look at the ERAs and stuff, it's not like he was in the 6s.
4.5. Yeah, first year 4.5 isn't great.
Okay. Yeah, it's not. And especially because like
3,
yeah, we should move on from Melancon. I think Giants fans' blood pressure got raised just thinking about the Melancon era. We're very blessed, let me tell you, to have the Camilo Doval era right now because that guy's a dragon out there on the mound.
Ben. Yeah, he's awesome. But speaking of raising your blood pressure, Ben, why don't we advertise to the good people what will raise your blood pressure, but in a good, thrilling way, ladies and gentlemen? That's gambling. Let's talk about FanDuel really quickly, guys. You know what's up. Super Bowl is over, but sports are not over. Hey, look, there's going to be baseball futures coming out soon. I don't think that they're out yet on FanDuel, but look for that. No, I don't know why the thumbs up just appeared next to me. That's been happening lately. And 2,
I can tell you why.
Oh, really? There we go. Yeah. But there's also hoops. We got March Madness coming up. Maybe you bet on INSQ versus Curry last week. Whatever. They've got you covered over at FanDuel because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's 150 buckaroos if you win, if your bet wins, I should say. So check it out. You got nothing to lose. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much more. Over-unders, the certain stats. If we're talking about basketball, you want to bet over on assists. Tyus Jones is an interesting little sleeper for all you gambling folks out there because he low-key racks up like 9 assists every night. How do I know this? Because I have him in fantasy basketball, and I stink this year. But at least I have Tyus Jones. So go check that out, guys, over at FanDuel. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. Official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And with that, we are just right back and rolling here on the Locked On Giants, Locked On Padres, hatred extravaganza. And now it's my turn. We've talked about Mark Melancon and Craig Stammen, 2 relievers. Ben, would you like to make another guess as to a player that I feel has been quite hated while I've been host of this Locked On Padres podcast?
I mean, we all know the obvious one, so I'm not even going to say it. But
I'll save him for last, yeah.
Yeah. I want to say. Oh, I got a good one. Austin Nola. How about that?
Yeah. Austin Nola. It's funny because in my experience, this one was also a hate for me because I was such a Luis Campusano truther. For a while, I feel like since I started talking to you, you knew who Luis Campusano was.
Yes, I did. You were talking about him from day one.
And last year he finally broke out, but it was so frustrating that Austin Nola for basically 2 years at the time, as in this past season, had been not good defensively and couldn't hit at all. So I was like, okay. I remember at one point I was like, all right, maybe he's a good defender. Like Austin Hedges once upon a time. Good defensive player. That's why they kept him in line. Okay. I was a little bit of a Francisco Mejia guy, but even still, I was like, okay, this is understandable. Austin Nola wasn't good at anything. And actively Campizano, who'd have 2 hits and then bench the next day. And Nola would come up, wouldn't hit the ball hard, wouldn't he would walk okay, and he wouldn't chase anything, but it doesn't matter if you can't get the ball out of the infield. So that was the issue there. He was heinous. I think actively cost the Padres a game last year if you go by Fangraphs. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to Google that really quickly because it was a miserable experience. In 2022 with the Padres, he had a 0.2 F4. Year after that, -1. So that's what we were dealing with at starting catcher. And you gave up Ty France, Andres Muniz for him.
I was going to say that's the kicker right there.
Yeah,
you gave up 2. I mean, Munoz is like, I mean, he was even at the time before he was maybe hurt at the time.
Yeah, I think he was a little bit banged up, but even still.
But
the fact
now
that you
he's
that dude who throws gas, right?
He's
like all the
nasty.
time. And Ty France, he had a down year, but there's a multiverse out there where the Padres don't have Cronenworth extended. They just have him at second, and they've got Ty France at first. And yeah, maybe they extended Machado. They still do Tatis. And then they kept all that money, retooled it elsewhere. We're just chilling with Cronenworth and Ty France right now. But
yeah,
what can I say?
Instead, you got Austin Nola.
Yep. Instead, we got Austin Nola. I think it's the trade and his poor performance. The only thing that doesn't make him like the top or even in the top tier is finding out the eye issue that he had, which recontextualizes his bad season. I would blame the Padres and management for being like, how do you not? I just don't understand how teams don't figure this out at some point. So that does explain maybe why he was so bad. But yeah, Austin Nola was driving people a little bit nuts with how poorly he played.
Is it my turn?
Yes, and I want to guess because I got it.
Do you?
It's a lock. I think it's a lock.
I don't know. This is kind of like it's in some ways it's like it's very Giants Padres.
Yeah.
And in other ways it's kind of like niche. So
okay.
Let's hear what you got.
Well, I don't know if it's Padres, but my guess was Hunter Strickland.
Oh, he is definitely on the list for sure. For sure. I don't go to that many games, but I was at the game when he drilled Bryce Harper and Harper charged the mound, and Hunter Strickland, he had to be like carried off the field by his own teammates.
Must have been thrilling to witness though.
It was just ugly because again, that was 2017 when they were just bad, and it was and speaking of Jeff Samardzija, he came out ripping and roaring trying to like tackle Bryce Harper, and he ended up running into Mike Morse and hitting him in the head and ending his career.
Right. I forgot about that. Yes.
And
Jeff Samardzija, man. My God.
Yeah. He was like charging at Harper and ended up hitting his own teammate in the head. And yeah, and Strickland, he had to be like carried off the field. Like one leg was like in the air. It was just embarrassing. And also he just wasn't like the stuff you would hope would translate to being good, but it just didn't. And he's still bouncing around. But he's definitely on the list. But my other guy is actually like similar in a lot of ways. He's a reliever with like kind of a temper, and or at least it seemed that way. But this is the thing, we've probably talked about it close to 10 times on the show, or at least I have. Bring it up all the time. It's one of my in 5 years hosting this show, it is one of the worst games I've ever experienced. And it was against the Padres, with the Padres as the home team in San Francisco.
I know exactly.
Trent Grisham hits a walk-off homer against, I had to even look up, Sam Coonrod. Sam Coonrod, okay? This was like, he was only on the team for a brief minute, but like in that brief minute, like that moment, a lot of people maybe didn't follow 2020 baseball super closely, but if you were into that year and just, I mean, I was as much as any time, because it was like a relief to get away from the reality of what the world was going through, to be able to watch the Giants play. And they were they were like in position to make the playoffs. And then they played the Padres for a 4-game series to end that 60-game season. And I think the Giants won the first game. At least they won the first. It was a doubleheader, I think, and they won the first game of a doubleheader. And then they were about to win the second game of the doubleheader, and Sam Coonrod, he like couldn't throw strikes. He like led off the inning by walking somebody, I believe, and ended up having like 2 on with 1 out and Grisham up, and Giants are in San Francisco. But the craziness of that season, like I don't even remember, it was because of like smoke in Seattle, or it was because Alex Dickerson had a
Yeah,
false positive COVID test in San
I remember.
Diego.
Yeah,
Yeah, so whatever the reason, the Padres were the home team, and Coonrod gave up a walk off, and that the Giants missed the playoffs by virtue of a tie. They tied the Brewers, and whatever the tiebreaker rules were,
hmm
like if they had one more win, and that was the bottom of the ninth, even though it was in San Francisco, and the Padres were up, and that you laugh, but man, that was one
I
of the
remember it.
worst. I mean, it ruined their season, even
Yeah,
though it was 60-game season. But if you're a hardcore baseball fan, like I was into that season, like it was a season. But beyond that, he was disliked for other things. Like he was the only Giants player. There was like this like kneeling in solidarity, George Floyd kind of thing on opening day, and he was the only player who refused to kneel, like in
yes,
solidarity, and he
yes.
stood, and it's just, um, it didn't go over well with people
No,
here,
no, I
and
imagine.
he said like he only kneels before.
I remember this. Clay Thompson was in his Instagram comments. I remember this being a thing. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, Clay
So
Thompson was cursing him out. Just Clay Thompson. Like, I don't know what he's doing. He's just hanging out. He's like, I'm bored. I'm just gonna start flaming people on Instagram.
flaming a Giants player.
Yeah, I know. That's what made it even
And
funnier.
so they got rid of him. I think they got rid of him that offseason, like
Yeah.
right after the 2020 season, when that disastrous Trent Grisham home run at the end of the year happened.
Trent
So
Grisham
this
is
is
like, it's just your evil ghost. He keeps
Trent
haunting
Grisham.
you.
Like this is one of those guys, like he's the anti Mark Melancon, where like you
Yeah.
look at his numbers and they're bad,
Yeah.
at least his hitting numbers. But then whenever he's up, like he
You
is
fear
so
him.
dangerous to, like as a Giants fan, you're like, this guy is gonna hit a
Uh-huh.
walk off at Oracle Park.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's just that's what happens. It's like me with Chris Taylor of the Dodgers, where
oh
I'm just like, oh my god, you know what I mean? Now, granted,
yeah,
I don't even think the Dodgers have any more minor players that I could even point to be like,
true.
yeah, that guy is weird. He shouldn't hit the walk off here because that's their whole team now. But alas, everybody's the point. Look, I remember that, and hey, at least you were gifted with the most inexplicably good season in the history of baseball the year after with the Giants. Inexplicable. I forgot
That's
who
true.
wrote recently. Someone wrote an article recently where like it still makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
It was so funny. It's like no one can explain it. And that's the beauty of sports, ladies and gentlemen. But here's something that I can explain. What I can't explain is that people really like to get their tickets and they like to get them on time for the best prices. And you know who can help you out with that? That is Gametime, ladies and gentlemen. We love Gametime here at the Lockdown Podcast Network. And let me tell you, look, here's the thing. If it's the day of, it's the last second, you want to be able to get tickets for decent prices. Gametime has you covered, and they pay you back if you find a better seat in the zone. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about, oh man, what if there's a better seat that's available? Don't worry. You kind of just like you reserve and then you hunt and find and they have you covered. They also give you like seat views to show you what exactly the seat looks like that you're purchasing. And it's not just sports, concerts, probably not like some of the big ones. Taylor Swift, is she still on tour? I don't even know. But Gametime helps you out, man. Gametime can help you out for all sorts of things: concerts, theater, comedy shows, whatever you want. They got you covered. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. They're easy to find. Views from all seats. Lowest prices guaranteed. Event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and much, much more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On. That's right here. I don't know how many times I have to tell the listeners and viewers, Ben. Like we just give you free things just for listening to this pod.
I know.
Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Check that out.
No
Check that
brainer.
out. So even if you hate us today and hate the players we're bringing up, we got you for $20 off your
20
first
bucks.
purchase. Just like that. Terms apply.
You're
Again,
going
create an
anyway.
account. Yeah, exactly. Create an account and redeem Locked On, spelled exactly how you would think, for $20 off. Gametime, Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Go check it out. Ben, let's go a little bit faster now because we got a lot of hate.
Rapid
I
fire.
feel it. I feel the hate still flowing through.
It's
So can you
coming.
guess my next one?
Will Myers.
No, Will Myers is on the most beloved list.
Okay. All
Sounds
right.
weird, but to me, he has to do with the obvious one, and that's why Will Myers became beloved by Padres fans. I think that's why. So we're gonna save him for last. But the next one I want to bring up really quickly, just because I brought it up last week.
Yeah.
Tommy Pham. Tommy Pham is hilarious. First of all, I think he's hilarious, and it's not because he's trying to be funny. And I'm not trying to make light of any like personal problems he has, but he hits like 700 against the Padres, and he was really bad with them. And I think a lot of Padres fans started not liking him because the 2021 collapse, he was one of the least clutch players in the entire league. Go look up his numbers in running scoring position. I believe it was him and Grisham were in the bottom 5, both somehow. I actually think Grisham was actually not as bad that year, but Pham was awful, right? And it was annoying because it's like all we need you to do is get on base and steal bases sometimes. Like how this isn't that hard. But Pham wasn't good there. He had a collision with Ha-Seong Kim, and
it was against the Giants.
It was against the Giants. There was like a weird he was just upset vibe, and it's like he wasn't even checking on Kim. Again, that might be personal stuff, maybe some anger stuff. Everyone knows about the Jock Peterson situation.
I was going to say, slap Jock Peterson in the face.
Exactly. So that's one for sure. But then the Ha-Seong Kim collision combined with the choke stuff, he just had a bad vibe, I think. Yeah. And when everyone was trying to celebrate, slam Diego and everything, just had a bad vibe. Wish him nothing but the best, though. I don't hate him as much as other people, but I do find the fact that he hit a third deck home run against the Padres when he was on the Reds. I was like, we could literally be superheroes and he'd find a way to beat us because they're the Padres. So that's one for me. With you, this is tough because I feel like all the obvious ones are out. So I'm gonna throw out a little bit of a random one. I'm gonna go with, see if I can find him really quickly. I'm gonna go and try and guess. What do we think of Joe Panic?
Oh, beloved.
Okay.
Beloved. He was integral in coming up as a rookie in 2014 and helping them win the World Series. And you just never can lose the love after something like that.
Look at this,
and that's what happened.
Team, man. I can't believe they
2021 team. There was somebody on the 2021 team who was hated even in 2021.
Could it be Tommy La Stella?
Tommy La Stella.
Go ahead.
Absolutely hated.
Go ahead.
Absolutely hated. Wasn't a big contract, but it was like one of the bigger contracts at the time that this new regime had handed out. Mm-hmm. And he just was never good. He had two bad Achilles. We learned like deep into the season one year that he had surgery on both Achilles. We knew he had one Achilles worked on, and then it like came out in like August. It's like, oh no, he had both Achilles, like he had surgery on both of them. So like he was unathletic. He didn't hit. He couldn't run. Like he was just like didn't belong on a baseball field. He belonged in like a wheelchair. Like to take care of his Achilles, I know what you mean. He was like
I'm
injured.
looking at the numbers right now.
He was injured all the time.
This is the type of decline, Ben, that turns you into the Joker. You know what I mean? Granted, this happens in baseball a lot, so you have to get used to it and understand. But just to illustrate for people, Ben's not joking around. Before signing with the Giants, just to highlight a couple of years, including his first, let's start even before that, 2017, OPS of 861. Year after that, he stumbled a little bit, 672. But then after that, 832, 819, 845, 792, and then 713, and then 632. OPS wise, just to illustrate the exterior numbers for fans.
He couldn't play defense or run.
So that was like, you had to hit, and he didn't hit.
Right.
So,
but it's like he also wasn't like a big power hitter or something. Yeah. So it's like, what is he bringing to the table? So he was hated just simply because, he like it was such a small deal, mm-hmm. which is these days they have given out some larger contracts.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like small potatoes, no matter like whether he performed, but they kept giving him chances. And so that kind of like, I think there was some infuriation with the front office and with Gabe Kapler for like just continuing to believe in him when it was just time after time after time after time
Yeah.
he was proving that he just wasn't able to do it. So they did end up cutting him loose with a year left on his contract.
Mhm.
And that was like the first time they did
And that
something
was
like
it.
that.
Yeah.
So I've
Seattle
got,
didn't change things either. Yeah.
yeah, he's done. I think he's
Mhm.
unsigned and
Yeah.
probably maybe career over at this point.
Yeah.
So that happened fast, and it started with the Giants, and it was immediate.
Mhm.
I've got two others, if I may. Do you want to go first,
Uh,
rapid fire, or do you want me to
yeah.
guess, or do you want me to guess or tell
I'll
you?
guess yours. I'll guess yours right now. Can
Okay,
you tell me the year?
last year.
Last year? Last year. Who the heck is on the Giants last year?
Yeah,
So like
exactly.
2023 or
Yeah,
2022?
2023.
2023? I mean, you guys had two players that were signed in Haniger and Conforto, my boy, who both disappointed, but Conforto was playing while Haniger was mostly hurt. So I'm going to go with Michael Conforto. Was he hated?
I think he was not. I think there was expectations and he didn't live up to them, and there was like frustration with that. But I wouldn't say hated. It was
Mhm.
two pitchers,
Oh,
Alex
man.
Wood and Ross Stripling. Look up the numbers for Alex Wood last year. Look even the last 2 years, or
Oh,
Ross
yeah.
Stripling. Ross
I've been
Stripling too.
obsessed with Alex Wood, too.
No,
I
no. I
know,
mean,
but
there's a reason he signed with the
so
A's.
convinced. I was so
They're both
convinced.
on the A's now.
I know. Oh, wow. Yeah, that
And
tells you everything.
look at, I mean, Alex Wood, I want to say his ERA was like 6.5 last year. And yet he complained about his role and,
Yeah.
like wanted to be a starter more and was like wanted to pitch deeper into games more. And I don't know. I just think it was, again, it's a culmination of frustration with the player, but also with the front office and also with the, Kapler for like continuing to run these guys out there when they had some young promising players who weren't getting opportunities. So and those are the two guys when I said they like actively, well, Wood was a free agent, but well, I'll add Anthony DeSclafani to the list. The reason he was so good in 2021, so was Alex
Yeah.
Wood. But
Yeah.
Wood
I
was
know.
more of a complainer. Wood was like
Yeah.
always complaining about his role.
Mhm.
And
Interesting.
um yeah, and I just think there's not a lot of love for Wood or Stripling, and probably even, to be honest, Jock Peterson, even though there were good times, the long history of being a Dodger
Mhm.
and just kind of some of the lackadaisical stuff. And we heard that there was like too much goofing around and like card playing towards the end of last season and not enough focus and preparation. And then he liked an Instagram post that was disparaging of San Francisco on his way out the
Still
door.
going a lot.
And
Been going around a lot lately, I've noticed with players.
yeah, but he's from here, and so like I don't know, man. Like you're a Dodger. That's how I feel. Like
Mm,
you're a Dodger, bro. And I think he'll be treated like that. I think the first at bat walks in Arizona, I think he's going to get booed.
mm.
And even though he was on the team and had his moments and was kind of fun, but I just think he's just not a giant.
Mhm. So
So
your final two, just to let's repeat all of your selections on this lovely, hateful filled episode really quickly one more time for the listeners.
okay, so I forget who was first.
Blanson,
Melanson, Strickland,
yes.
Coonrod, Listella, Samarja,
Mhm.
um, Alex Wood, Ross Stripling, and then I mentioned Jock Peterson and Anthony DeSclafani. And they
Yeah,
actively traded away Stripling and
yeah,
DeSclafani. So that's part of what makes this offseason like kind of feel good is like you got rid of some guys who fans were not happy with.
absolutely. That liking the post is very funny. It's definitely, guys, not to get too, you know, on the podcast, but it's definitely just an innocent thing that people tend to talk about certain cities the most that are like most unsafe. I'm looking at you, Ratty Telez. going to Milwaukee, which has the highest crime rate in the country or whatever.
Yeah, and
But anyway,
the guy has no idea what he's talking
it's a
about.
narrative. It's a narrative, I guess. And there's plenty of narratives that go both sides. But
San Francisco is a beautiful city. It has a lot of unbelievably nice areas and views, and there are definitely some problems and some areas you want to avoid. But it's a great city overall.
I would reckon people who feel this way to look a little bit at the entire country, I think is important. And I'm not saying one place being worse than this, although in the case of Bradley Telez, I wasn't kidding. Like in terms of violent crime, I'm pretty sure Milwaukee is much, much higher than San Francisco.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. And
Yeah.
They say, oh, Bay Area native, and he's from like 2 hours away. So it's not the Bay Area.
Exactly. Ben, would you like to guess my last rapid fire selections?
I mean, Hosmer, come on.
Yes, Eric Hosmer is on there. I'll get to him in a second.
Okay. Shoot. Recent or like kind of past?
Since recent. So since I've been hosting the show. Because in the past, it's like, not Andrew Kashner. Andrew Kashner wasn't hated. It was just disappointing. And I think there's a difference. But go ahead if you got any more on the Padres lore. Because you have it. The Padres hatred has been so weird. There's been so many characters that have almost become memes. At least the Giants players have become memes. Where like, except for Jock Peterson, where it's like everyone knows how bad certain players are on the Padres. You got any guesses? Or you want me to go ahead?
No, I'm blanking. Go ahead.
I've got a lot. I want to quickly mention Ian Kinsler. I remember him being really hated by the Padres. I don't fully remember why, but it seemed like it stemmed from him getting a lot more playing time than he deserved just because he was Ian Kinsler. And he was horrendous for the Padres. I believe he hit below 200. Let me pull it up really quickly.
I got a guess too.
217. He hit with the Padres, 278 on base.
Yikes.
He was dreadful. And I think people were like, start Greg Garcia, who that year at second base, 248, 364, 354 slash line. Not incredible, but a lot more helpful than Ian Kinsler. So I think people were frustrated with him. So that's just an honorary mention.
Can I
Adam
guess one?
Frazier.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Adam Frazier. That's a great. Oh, yeah. I
Adam
told you
Frazier.
at the time of that trade. I was like, I don't like that. I don't like that trade one bit. You bought high.
Bought high. I don't think he was hated as a guy. I think everyone knew this is a Preller thing. I don't know why you bought high on this guy, but that's my thing is I don't think people hated him. They hated the baseball him. You know what I mean?
Right,
so it wasn't quite there for him. Dinelson Lamet, a tiny bit, but it was more a sad hate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're just like, I hate this because you were literally a top 5 Cy Young finisher, and then you opted not to get the surgery, and your career's basically been over since then, and it stunk. I know the Dodgers fans love to pretend they beat the Padres fair and square. That was really cute. They lost to Nelson Lamet and Mike Clevenger in that series. So 2 rather infamous players, especially the latter.
Can I guess one?
Yes, go ahead.
Rougned Odor.
No, he's only hated by me.
Okay.
He's only hated by me.
He's so bad.
His past stuff in Texas. He was actually really obscenely clutch for points for the Padres. Right. He was the only one coming up, so he was fine.
All right.
I don't like Rougned Odor. I will say for someone who's with the Padres for a small stretch, Jake Arrieta, kind of one of the, not the face, but one of the like, yeah, that's what happens when you have no depth. On top of some of the comments he had made about masking COVID and all that stuff, not to get too much into that. People didn't like him for that, and he was really bullish on it, saying and talking about it really harshly, and then came in and was awful. So he's up there, but not there long enough. Chris Paddock, I can't decide on because I can't. He's weird because I think people didn't like his attitude at points of like the sheriff and all these things. That was his nickname. Right. He did have a little bit of a vibe to him that was like he thought he was a little bit better. But again, he seems like he still treated all the fans well, so that wasn't quite there. So maybe the odd field results weren't there, but at least he was kind of nice to the fans, similar to Will Myers, who was just buying people shots at the bar after they beat the Dodgers.
Nice.
Number 1, everyone knows who it is. He's blocked me on Twitter. Ben, I would argue for someone who played for a team I follow and or love, whatever team I'm a fan of, is at least in the top 3 of my most hated players ever. And to quickly summarize, because I've done this before, Google my channel and look up Eric Hosmer. You will find I broke it down. It is not just because he was bad. That's part of it too. It was because he was bad. It was because of the contract. It was because every single time this guy didn't perform, we would get little reports from people who are reporters, and I believe them, always talking about how much of a great leader he is. That's cute. That's adorable. We love it. And by the way, I have heard sources behind the scene that do confirm he was a great teammate. That's great. And the problem, though, is that every time he would boot a grounder, when that you could look up, you've probably seen the video. Eric Hosmer is the worst player in baseball. You can find it on YouTube. I'm going to watch it tonight.
And I will promise you, there's a lot of Giants fans listening who think Eric Hosmer was good. And Javi is here to tell you he was not good. He is not good at all. And
he's like
defensively,
a playoff merchant. You know what I mean?
He's
all of his records playoff merchant. So instead of being like a BABIP merchant, it's like because his style of play was more conducive to putting the ball in play, and sometimes you'll get really hot. Start of the 2023 season or 2022 season, I'm sorry, he was hitting like 300. He was amazing. Everyone's freaking out. I was like, yeah, but his BABIP is like 390, guys, and he doesn't run fast, so he's getting very lucky. Just to give a little bit,
it's going to come down.
Elementary,
and it did.
And that's just a basic introduction.
And defensively, I think people think he has a reputation for being great defensively, but he is like bizarrely bad. If you watch that highlight or low light clip,
go look it up.
Like his footwork, like I could easily play, or like at least footwork wise, a better first base than what you see in that video. I mean, just go cover the bag. Like, what are you doing?
It's inexplicable errors. It's not like up grounder. He had those too, but it would be like, why are you catching the ball like this?
Yeah, like what are you doing?
Why are you waiting for the ball to get to you while you're running to first instead of running and then planting like this?
Yeah.
Why are you calling for it and it just inexplicable stuff?
That ball that dropped over his head in Houston. Oh my God.
It's that, and it is so. It's not just the contract. It's not just that he was bad. It's not just because of the leadership. It is because that would be used to deflect everything. And then 2020, all of a sudden, go look up the numbers. Line drive rate. It spiked. He hit for more power. Whoa! What happens here? And then media that I don't want to call out, just absolutely fluffing this guy. Like new dogs or old dogs can learn new tricks. He's back. All of you guys were ungrateful. He's here. And it almost felt like people would go out of the way to hype up his good qualities, which he did have. Leadership and that one year when he hit the ball hard, or hit the ball in the air, I should say. And he has that. And then on top of that, would also have moments where didn't seem to care about being in San Diego at all, right? As soon as he gets asked about a trade request, he freaks out on a reporter, Jeff Sanders of the San Diego Union Tribune. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand. That must be annoying to be asked about trade requests. Will Myers never did that, and you would know he was in trade rumors for like 6 years. You know what I mean? Will Myers never had a freak out. And lastly, and certainly not least, like I said about the fan stuff, the Ben and Woods, who host a really big show for San Diego Padres fans, they reached out to him, never went on the show. They've had Tatis. They've had Preller like once a month. They've had Manny. They've had Cronenworth. They've had everyone. But Hosmer inexplicably never went on the show. So it is more than that. Not just money, not just playing, not just deflection because of leadership, but also the fan base and all that stuff. That's why people like Will Myers. Yeah, he didn't come through and whatnot, but he was cool in the community. And like I said, when they beat the Dodgers, was literally at a bar buying shots for people. Hosmer never even did that. So that is why. And I'm glad he blocked my Padres account on Twitter. Although I blocked me on my personal. You coward. Come on. And it's totally his prerogative, by the way. If I was an athlete and people were talking smack, I'd probably block them too. But block me on my main account. Go ahead. It's the one with the anime picture. So go and find me.
Speaking of people who are out of the game, right? Isn't he unsigned? And the Padres are still paying him for 2 more years, $13 million a year. So
I would have appreciated you not bringing that up.
That's another. I mean, that's another reason to hate him. You owe him $13 million each of the next 2 years.
It's tough out here, and to keep on with it, he's not in the game. And then you have, I believe it was Austin Hedges mouthing off, "Hey, look at them, not doing so well without Eric Hosmer." And I'm like, what?
He is the most overrated player in the last 3 decades.
And I don't want to take away from players when we talk about the behind the scenes stuff. That stuff has to matter. It has to. It's just hard to measure. But
You
if
can
you're
have
not
a
producing
coach
ever-
providing that.
Exactly. And if you're never producing on the field, then it matters to me. And if you're getting paid so much because it actively will impact the team being able to spend more and add more players, then I care about that. You can't just dismiss fans and keep saying, well, he's a great leader. And without getting too much further
Get a
into
coach who's a great leader, man.
Exactly. Without getting too much further into it, folks, that's about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast. The only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves, as well as the Locked On Giants podcast. A huge chunky boy for you guys on this lovely Tuesday and or Wednesday, whenever you're listening to it, or 2028. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe
Who
people
knows?
are like, hey, who were the most hated Padres of the early 2020s? Let me go listen to these guys.
This
Totally
video
possible.
is going to blow up, have like 10 million views, and people are going to be watching it for
Hosmer's
well after we're gone. Yeah, Hosmer's going to block your YouTube channel. He's going to leave a comment and then block.
Leave a comment, then block. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Ben, do you have anything to plug?
You know I never do. Like, what would I plug?
Gotta ask anyway.
Like, what?
Go check
what
him
does
out
that
on Twitter.
mean? Yeah, Twitter.
At Ben Kaspick.
Yeah.
BenKaspick.
Yes.
As well as me at Javapeno, Javiipeno. Also at LO_Padres on Twitter. You'll find both of our accounts if you just look up stuff. So have fun with that. For me, tomorrow, stay tuned. We're going to be talking with Connor Newcomb about Anthony Santander of the Baltimore Orioles and whether or not that's a fit, and also praising him for having new ownership. As a team who had new ownership lately, I'm going to tell him, congrats, welcome to the show. You actually have a chance now. So stay tuned to that, guys. But until next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies, and stay. I say gregarious every time, don't I?
It's yes, you do, and you're like, what? You're like, right? What am I? What did I just say?
Just stay great.
Grateful, great. Yeah,
just stay grateful, Giants friends. Stay grateful.
Yeah, you won 3 championships in a 5-year span. I get it; it's been rough since.
Yeah,
for periods, but still gratitude.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Until next time, everybody, take care.